Hello everybody, my name's Emma Reid. I'm an employment law solicitor with Ergo Law in Edinburgh, a specialist firm of solicitors advising on the workplace and things such as maternity leave, pregnancy, the additional rights around those times of life, but also now advising on coronavirus and the impact of that on the workplace too. So government guidance from the 16th of March is that pregnant women are considered vulnerable in relation to coronavirus and need to be very careful, particularly following social distancing measures quite rigorously. From the 26th of March, things became stricter and we had lockdown, and that really limited the reasons that people can travel for. It's important to remember that whilst everything we're looking at the moment, this is the 5th of April that this is recorded on, is highly unusual, and the government's new job retention scheme is a new scheme with new rules around eligibility and payment, employment law actually remains largely as it was. So there always has been additional protection for maternity and pregnancy rights, and that is something that is now interacting with this new set of circumstances. At the end of the day, if an employer is doing something which causes concern, employees should always consider whether they're protected by existing employment law and the terms of their contracts. So the new set of circumstances has also brought in new terminology. Social distancing, shielding and self-isolating are all new terms. Social distancing applies to everybody, but there are particularly stringent rules for pregnant ladies. Shielding also applies to pregnant ladies who may have additional health conditions, and you would have had a letter from the government if this applied to you. And self-isolating applies to anybody who has coronavirus symptoms. So we've been asked lots of questions around pregnancy, maternity and coronavirus, and I'm going to deal with a few of those each in turn. So the first question we're being asked is, I'm pregnant, my employer is insisting on me carrying on working, I feel unsafe because of my job, the nature of my role in the workplace, or because I need to travel on public transport to get there. What can I do? Well, employers have health and safety obligations towards all pregnant ladies. These obligations include the need to undertake a risk assessment if they employ women of a childbearing age. This risk assessment should address the risks to new mothers and pregnant ladies of their particular workplace. And once they've assessed the risk, the employer then needs to make reasonable adjustments to alter working conditions or hours to avoid any risks. If they can't do that, then the employer must offer the employee a suitable alternative role within their workplace, and if there isn't one, they should suspend the employee on full pay. So this is a suspension on maternity grounds. Given the strength of government advice and certain jobs or working environments carrying a higher level of risk than if the employee was not going into work, these protections would likely apply to individuals working in care environments, for example, medical environments, or other jobs with a high level of public face-to-face contact, which would include supermarkets. On a practical level, if you've been sent home and told you will get sick pay, or if your employer is insisting on you carrying on work in circumstances that cause risk for you, this is what we would recommend that you do. First of all, make sure your employer has been notified that you're pregnant. There's formal documentation to do this. Ensure that they've carried out a risk assessment and ask them about that if you're not sure. Explain the risks that you're worried about in relation to coronavirus and your pregnancy. Explain to them that you consider they have responsibilities towards you due to health and safety regulations in relation to your pregnancy. You should then suggest any adjustments or alternative working which you think would work. For example, it might be possible for you to work from home. If that's not possible, you would then be telling them that you think you should be suspended on maternity grounds, and you could point out to them that this should be on full pay. The second question I'm going to answer is the question of, if I'm pregnant and told that I cannot work due to COVID-19, what should I be paid? Well, it does seem possible within the terms of the guidance for employers, the Job Retention Scheme guidelines, to furlough someone who is unable to work due to the pandemic and claim wages costs. The question of the amount of pay that should be paid to the employee is different. Given that you may be entitled to suspension on full pay, as we just explained in the previous question, it would be advisable to resist a pay cut on the basis of being put on furlough. Unless you're unwell or are caring for people in the same household and therefore have been advised to do a household quarantine, your employer should not be putting you on sick leave and paying you sick pay. The next question is, can I insist on being furloughed because I'm pregnant and need to self-isolate? Unfortunately, no one can insist on furlough. The job retention scheme is simply a funding arrangement for businesses to assist with wage costs. Depending on the business's circumstances, if the coronavirus pandemic has had an impact, employers can source this funding. The arrangement between the employee and the business is a separate issue and is a matter for agreement, bearing in mind the difficulties that businesses are facing and the limited options for some employers and employees. Any furlough arrangement should be in writing, so if you are in a furlough arrangement, make sure your employer gives you a letter of agreement explaining how it will work and what you will be entitled to. If you do not want to be put on furlough, you may find that the alternative for the business is redundancy, so you could ask your employer to consider you for redundancy. Another option may be to take some paid annual leave to delay things, but this would always need to be in agreement with the business. The next question we're asking is, can my employer insist that I start my maternity leave early because it's unsafe or impossible for me to work? In some circumstances where an employee is absent from work due to pregnancy, maternity leave can start early. But in these circumstances, if an employee cannot work safely, the correct approach would be suspension on full pay, and it may actually be discrimination if you're forced into an early maternity leave. Can I still be made redundant if I'm furloughed? Unfortunately, yes, you can. Employment law does continue as normal, and ladies on maternity leave are given additional legal protection in a redundancy situation. For example, you have a preferential right to suitable alternative jobs, but it is not unlawful to make either a pregnant lady or one on maternity leave redundant. It's just that employers must be very careful that they do not discriminate against these particular individuals, and they should be treated fairly, of course. But these are general legal rules which always apply and are not specifically related to coronavirus. Next question we're asking is, what if you're pregnant and then furloughed prior to mat leave? How does this affect your entitlement to maternity pay? Well, this depends on your entitlements. The Job Retention Scheme guidelines seem to say that employers can use that scheme to pay contractual maternity pay. Contractual maternity is whatever you get over and above statutory maternity pay. But it doesn't seem to support the scheme paying statutory maternity pay. The first few weeks of statutory maternity pay are paid at 90% of your earnings. So if you are taking a wage cut because you're being furloughed, and for example you're receiving 80% of your usual pay during furlough, this could affect your statutory maternity pay during those first few weeks, as those first few weeks are based on your earnings in approximately weeks 18 to 26 of your pregnancy. It's definitely worth having a conversation with your employer about how furlough will affect your maternity entitlements. You might find that they take that on board and hopefully do something so that you aren't negatively affected. Can I return early from maternity leave to be furloughed? Well, the government guidance says that businesses can claim from the Job Retention Scheme for employees on maternity leave in order for employers to recoup the costs of occupational maternity pay. However, if you're on statutory maternity pay only or unpaid leave, it seems that you would probably need to give notice to end your maternity leave first before being furloughed. Maternity leave can be brought to an end by agreeing with your employer. Otherwise, if you are an employee and you're having to give notice yourself to end your maternity leave, you would need to do that with a certain amount of notice, and that is 8 weeks, which is required. All employees taking maternity leave must take a minimum of 2 weeks compulsory maternity leave at the beginning. So you should bear in mind that the furlough scheme could end at any time, and if you've given notice to end your maternity leave at some stage after those 2 weeks, you wouldn't be able to go back onto maternity leave. It really just leaves for me to say thank you very much for watching the video. I hope you stay healthy and well. It's a very stressful time, particularly if you're pregnant or unwell or have other health conditions. Please don't hesitate to get in touch if we can be of any help whatsoever in relation to employment law, pregnancy and maternity rights, or anything else that's going on at work. I will put our contact details at the end of the video so you can reach me. Thank you for watching. Bye.